Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. This is your host, MagMongoSlade. Today, we're going to talk about my favorite subject, which is storytelling in pro wrestling. Via Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff, once again, has criticized AEW's ability to tell stories on their show. And let's just get right into it. This is what Eric Bischoff said on his podcast. He says, I've been saying this from the get-go. I've been saying from day one, whether it's WWE or AEW, it's a commitment to story. And AEW has proven my point. The fact that they have plateaued has proven my point. You can add whoever you want to your roster, and it won't matter beyond a week or two unless the audience is engaged in a compelling story that makes them look forward to next week. Not because they're just wrestling fans and they want to see a 4-star Tokyo Dome match. No, that's not going to grow your audience. That's going to satisfy the audience you already have. If you have that phenomenal athletic match, great. And it's the payoff to the story. That's excellent. That's perfect. But if you're not building stories that people focus on, talk about, relate to, or make the fans want to come back every week and see what's going next, if you're not doing that, I don't give a damn. He continues, you could take WWE's existing roster, bring it over to AEW, and nothing is going to happen. It's story. And first of all, you have to have a basic understanding of how to tell a story. And I don't see it. I see it in WWE, and I don't see it in AEW. Now, the most common response to this from people who like AEW has been, Bischoff is simping for Vince. He was most recently seen on SmackDown, so clearly he's being paid by WWE to diss AEW, or he's still got a bee in his bonnet over Tony Khan dissing WCW and Ted Turner. If that's your opinion, fine. I don't know what else to tell you. What I say is not going to change your mind. But for those of you who are actually interested in this subject, allow me to explain what he means. When the average AEW fan, the ones who didn't get all emo and start bleeding and crying and saying that he needs to shut up and stop cashing his Stanford checks, which he probably still gets because he likely does get royalties from WWE. What they will point out is, look at MJF and CM Punk. How can you say AEW doesn't have stories? What they're trying to do is trying to find the exception that disproves the rule. When you look at, and I didn't look at this very closely, so if I'm wrong, please feel free to let me know. But I'm guessing that the MJF CM Punk segments on that show were the highest rated segments on that show. How do I figure that that's true? Because the segments featuring the fat matches and segments featuring CM Punk and MJF magically got longer and longer and longer as the story went on. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is Tony Khan was looking at the quarter hours and saying to themselves, people are engaged in CM Punk and MJF. I'm going to give them more of that. So all of a sudden, they got a 30-minute promo battle where they're standing in the ring talking to each other. Each one of them gets a 15-minute promo segment to themselves where they just stand around and monologue. The whole point of this is to keep people engaged in the show for as long as possible with something that they actually want to see and somebody that they actually want to listen to. That was the point. He proved Bischoff correct in showing you that in giving more time to the MJF Punk story, it proved that the story should have been the focus and not the matches. Now, we know that the match itself, the first match that was on TV, it didn't draw very well. I don't know what was going on. Maybe people just weren't there yet. Ultimately, when you started seeing that peter out and that story is now over, things have kind of normalized again. During the peak of that story, they were doing 1.1, 1.0 in terms of millions of viewers, not, 18 to 49s, okay? So we talking about 1 million, 1 million, 1 million, 1, whatever, in that era. And they were occasionally trying to get close to 1.2. And then you would see, when it's over, it kind of crept back down under 1 million. So now that the story that everybody liked is over, people have just kind of said, okay, that's done. I got what I wanted out of this whole thing. Now we can move on. I don't have to watch this anymore. Now, what Bischoff is saying is you need to have that same level of commitment up and down the card. You can't just have it in one feud or one feud at a time. You know? That's what he's saying, is that you can't have one feud at a time where the story is engaging and people are interested in it. Because every time AEW does do something good, it does balloon interest in their product. But what they have been trying to do is book big matches or do unique arenas or something like that, and hoping that the incoming media storm that comes with it will be positive and will carry them forward. Like when they did the big Kenny Omega Bryan Danielson match. I think, wasn't that in New York? I believe Grand Slam or something like that they did in Arthur Ashe. That they did quite a bit of media in New York about that. The show didn't do what everybody thought it would have done because there was no story really involved. And Bischoff again could have told you that. You didn't do a good job of telling the story of Kenny Omega versus Bryan Danielson. It was just a who's the better man story. We don't care. You know, like if you don't care who the better man is, then it doesn't matter. This story doesn't matter. But the MJF CM Punk story, that was something for people to relate to. You know, the whole don't meet your heroes thing. You know, it was very engaging. Now, if you look at some of the recent title switches, for instance, Scorpio Sky winning the TNT title, compare that to Ricochet winning the Intercontinental Championship. You know, so let's run through the stories real quick. Scorpio Sky is about to be entered into a qualifying match for the Face of the Revolution Golden Donut match. He complains, says that he shouldn't have to be in it because he's already won it before, and that he hasn't been beaten in 500 and blah, blah, blah days or whatever the hell. Nobody's seen any of this stuff, by the way. He's just saying that he hasn't been beaten. So he feels he should get first dibs on a championship over the guy who won the ladder match for the championship. And for some odd reason, this is okay with Tony Khan. I mean, if you're one of the guys in the ladder match, how would you feel? That's a loophole, right? That's a logic hole in the story because you got all these guys competing in a ladder match for the same opportunity that Scorpio Sky was just gifted. The same opportunity that Warhorse jumped off his couch and tweeted at Cody and got. Come on, that doesn't make any sense. But let's say you're willing to overlook that because Scorpio Sky is relatively unbeaten. At least he claims to be. So they have the match, and Scorpio Sky doesn't win the title straight up because, you know, hey, while you guys have been sleeping on me, I've learned a new hold. I've learned a new trick. I'm as dominant as ever. No. What happens is the heels gang up on the baby faces. Paige Van Zant, she beats up Ty Conti or intimidates Ty Conti, and that's a distraction to Sammy Guevara and allows Scorpio Sky to win the title. Okay, it's all right, but Scorpio Sky is a relatively weak champion. Again, he's a guy that nobody really has any emotions tied up in. Nobody really cares about Scorpio Sky. Now, there's a lot of people who say that they do, but there's not a lot of people who care about Scorpio Sky. They just don't, you know? Compare that to Ricochet when he won the Intercontinental Championship. Like Scorpio Sky, Ricochet was barely used. In fact, he was, I'm pretty sure, unlike Scorpio Sky, Ricochet just did a job for like Sheamus or Ridge Holland or something like that within the last month before he won the title. So Ricochet gets a championship match against Sami Zayn. Sami Zayn is, you know, giddy. He has won back the Intercontinental title. He defeated Shinsuke Nakamura clean, by the way. A little underhanded, but it was clean. He's feeling like he's finally broken through the conspiracy that we've been telling for 2 years. We've been talking about this conspiracy with the Sami Zayn character for 2 years. And he's just been nonstop talking about this conspiracy. And he's talking about how he's finally flaunted the conspiracy to people who are trying to keep him from having the Intercontinental Championship. He's finally got it back. And he's going to go out there and show Ricochet what's what. But unfortunately for him, he crossed paths with Johnny Knoxville. And Johnny Knoxville has been sticking in the craw of Sami Zayn for the last month or so. So he's not going to allow Sami Zayn to actually succeed. Therefore, he distracts Sami Zayn and costs Sami Zayn the Intercontinental Championship. Now the crowd erupts because, hey, new champion. But it was also a story, but it was a twofold story. It was Ricochet. People were kind of engaged with Ricochet. They were feeling like he was a guy who was not really used to his full potential. You know? So there was a lot of that there. Now, I would easily say that Ricochet was in a worse position than Scorpio Sky was in when he won the title. I have no problem admitting that. But the story wasn't about Ricochet. The story was about Sami Zayn and Johnny Knoxville. Because that's the match going into WrestleMania. This was just a notch on the story of Johnny Knoxville versus Sami Zayn. Ricochet being the beneficiary of that is great. That's good for the fans and the people who like Ricochet. But everybody else knows that the title change only really occurred because Johnny Knoxville interfered. Now, when you compare those two things, and then you understand that the Ricochet, Johnny Knoxville, Sami Zayn story is not even the B or C story of SmackDown. It's like a fourth tier story on SmackDown. But SmackDown routinely has stories from top to bottom. Routinely have story elements throughout the show. Either at the beginning, mostly at the beginning and the end. But sometimes at the at the midpoint, the 9 o'clock hour, the story will really kick in. You know, there will be story beats dropped throughout the show. And that was their way of keeping people engaged. You get a little bit of Roman Reigns at the beginning. You know, you find out whatever Roman is doing that night. He's signing a contract, whatever. And then here comes Sami Zayn. It's like, oh, okay, so we know what Roman is doing. Now Sami Zayn is here. We know Sami Zayn is involved with this whole thing with Johnny Knoxville. We know that. And he's going to defend the Intercontinental Championship, and he's so giddy and he's so happy. It would be great for Johnny Knoxville to screw him over. Oh, shit, he did. He did that. Now you get to stay engaged in the story, and then a guy that you kind of like actually benefited from this. So that's how, you know, Bischoff is looking at things. As opposed to AEW, where the beginning of the show is a match. Usually it's a match that's built up the previous week. You know, a 6-man tag, a tag team match, something high-flying and with tons of spots. If that's your thing, you're all in from the beginning. If you're looking for storylines and stuff like that, this really is not going to be it. So you're hoping that the storylines start kicking in the next segment or maybe immediately afterwards, which sometimes, to give AEW some credit, they do. They will have a hot opening match that bleeds into a storyline immediately afterwards. But how many times do they just have match occurs? You know, strange debut happens in the middle of the show or near the end of the show to detract from the fact that whatever just occurred had no business occurring. You know? See, this is what Bischoff was talking about. It's like WWE is at least trying to tell a story. Trying to. When you look at Raw, for instance, the most recent Raw, which I believe was made March the 15th, people were bitching that Seth Rollins and Kevin Owens were fighting for the opportunity to host a talk show against Stone Cold Steve Austin. I, of course, said that they're obviously trying to fight Stone Cold Steve Austin because Steve Austin has made it clear that he wants to fight. Of course, it makes no sense for Seth Rollins to win this match or even be in it because Kevin Owens is the one who got Steve Austin to want to fight him. It wouldn't work with Seth Rollins being in that spot. So the story doesn't make any sense. The story kind of falls flat. But at least it was an attempt. The second thing to that is it doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense on that perspective because that's not what the story is. We know they're not changing the KO show. That's not going to change. The story is, what is Seth Rollins going to be doing at WrestleMania? And he's gotten so desperate that he's even trying to steal Kevin Owens' idea. That's the story. The story isn't Seth Rollins wants to be the host of WrestleMania. That's not, or the host of the KO show. That's not what the story is. The story is Seth Rollins going throughout the night had no idea of what to do. His, visionary architect. He's the smartest guy. He knows everything. He can figure it out. But when under pressure, he couldn't figure it out. And his only good idea was to steal someone else's idea. And then he failed at that. So now next week, we have to say, okay, Seth Rollins, he had nothing. His tag team idea fell through. Well, his world title idea fell through. His tag team idea fell through. His plan to steal Kevin Owens' WrestleMania plans, that fell through. Now what is he going to do? So if you're engaged in the Seth Rollins storyline, you have something to look forward to the next week. What on earth is Seth Rollins going to do now? If, Sami Zayn got screwed out of the Intercontinental Championship by Johnny Knoxville, now what? Then the next week or whatever, Sami Zayn, I think it might have been even later that same day, Sami Zayn makes the official challenge to Johnny Knoxville. And I think they waited a week or so before Knoxville actually accepted it. So they made you wait for the acceptance. And now we get the build to the match or whatever. That's what Bischoff is talking about. As opposed to the world title feud of AEW Revolution, which could, and people are saying, oh, it's the biggest buy rate that they've ever done or something like that. Okay, maybe. You could probably thank CM Punk and MJF for that. But look at the main event feud for that story. It's all about who are the Young Bucks' real friends and who's the better Adam. It's like, that's not a pay-per-view main event idea. It's just not. And part of the reason why Hangman Page doesn't feel like a real world champion is because he hasn't been put in any real deep storylines. Even the storyline that everyone claims is a storyline, where it was a 2-year story where yada 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 yada. And it's like, well, he went away, then he came back, he won a ladder match, got a title shot, and won. That's, I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know about that being the best story that they've ever told or anything like that. I mean, those are plot elements, but is it really a story? Thunder Rosa beating Britt Baker to win the title. That was good. Interesting storytelling, but it's a collection of plot points. It's not a story. What is a story? And this is what I want people to understand. It's the bits and pieces that is between the events, right? I learned this from, what was that guy's name? He did the, When Wrestling Is Not Wrestling. He got Me Too'd. He's a screenwriter. What the fuck is his name? I can't remember. But he says that when you sit down and you write a script or a story of any kind, you pick 3 things that you want to occur in each act, right? The story is what you put in between. So if you have a story about Johnny trying to find his lost cat, if the first 3 things you want to do is you want to identify the cat. What kind of cat is it? What is the cat's relationship to Johnny? Maybe it's his safety animal. Maybe the kid's been abused and he loves his cat so much he holds on to the cat. And then you introduce the cat. You introduce Johnny and the cat's their relationship. Then you create some conflict. Why would the cat run away? Did the cat die? What's happening with the cat? Right? So you start out with Johnny and the cat. You introduce the cat, then you introduce the conflict with the cat, and then you take the cat away. So now the story is everything in between. What kind of house does Johnny live in? What kind of neighborhood does he live in? What kind of who is his parents? What kind of people are his parents? Are his parents abusing him? Are the parents abusing the cat? Is the cat, is Johnny poor? He can't really afford the cat. So instead of the cat running away, he gives the cat away. Those are the stories. That's how a story is told. You can take most stories and strip them down to their very bare bones of they're just a collection of events. What the story is what's going on in between. What AEW fails to do is put things in between. For instance, Thunder Rosa winning the women's championship. Great plot point. Great story element. What did they do right before that? Well, they said, we're going to put him in a steel cage because Britt Baker keeps winning and surviving because of outside interference. Okay. But how did we get to Thunder Rosa being in this match again? She just lost, right? They didn't tell the story about that. They just had Thunder Rosa wrestle another match. Oh, she beat Layla Hirsch. Oh, okay. How about we do this? How about Thunder Rosa loses at Revolution? She comes back the next night and says, I want a rematch in a steel cage with Britt Baker. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get it. And Britt Baker says no. And then maybe later in the show, Thunder Rosa says, all right, if you win, I will never challenge you for that title ever again. Britt Baker says no. Later in the evening, Thunder Rosa says, I will put my hair on the line. If you beat me, you can shave my head bald. And Britt Baker says, oh, interesting. I get a chance to humiliate you because I know I can beat you already. I get a chance to humiliate you. I think I'll take that chance. Steel cage, no big deal. I'll beat you again, shave your head bald. It's something for me now. There's something in it for her. And so she willingly gives Thunder Rosa the chance and then loses. Rather than Thunder Rosa just beat somebody else. It's like, wait a minute. How did Thunder Rosa even get in this position to fight Layla Hirsch? Because she literally just lost. So it's a great plot element, but there's nothing in between. When you look at, and they told the story of the last Lights Out match and the current Lights Out match being at the same event. It's like, oh, that's great. That's rather cool. Now tell me what took place in between this in this year here that made that worth it, that made it really a build up for this event. Because I can tell you Thunder Rosa spent a lot of time on Dark during this time. She spent a lot of time out of the spotlight. She wasn't really cutting too many promos. Then she kind of got into that mixed up feud with Mercedes Martinez, which is how we got back to her and Britt Baker feuding in the first place. Then Mercedes Martinez magically disappeared. She just vanished. Poof. Just disappeared. Went nowhere. We don't know how we got from Thunder Rosa just lost to her to Thunder Rosa gets another title shot and now she's won. It's weird. Compare that to Bianca Belair and Becky Lynch. Similar situation. Becky Lynch defeats Bianca Belair. She wins the title. She, of course, goes to Raw. They swap titles, yada, yada, yada. They wrestle matches on Raw in which Becky cheats to win. So Bianca is knocked back. She has to start all over again. She starts gaining wins. She's on TV, cutting promos, gaining wins. Becky Lynch is on TV feuding with other people, gaining wins. The Royal Rumble occurs. Everybody thinks Bianca's going to win the Royal Rumble. She doesn't win. She loses. But she still maintains her momentum. She goes into Elimination Chamber. She wins that. Now she's back in the hunt. Not 2 weeks later. Months later. Now there's so much space in between the two that you don't really need to do something drastic like put Bianca Belair's hair on the line. Or if she loses, she can never challenge Becky again. I mean, that it would be nice to have a nicer something for Becky to actually gain from beating her again, but it's not really necessary. Because if you look at it, bare bones plot points. The story starts with Bianca Belair getting embarrassed by Becky Lynch at SummerSlam. The next plot point is the matches that they had on Raw, where Becky Lynch wins by cheating. In between all of that, Bianca Belair has to, get involved with the audience again. Because a lot of people are going to lose faith in her. So now she's got to get that audience back behind her. It's almost like she got kicked off the mountain. And now Becky's at the top of the mountain and Bianca has to climb the mountain again. She gets to the top again and then Becky kicks her back off the mountain. She tumbles down the mountain. She's got to climb that mountain one more time. So now that's the story. You have your plot points, but the story is everything in between. The story is how Bianca Belair is going to rise from the ashes after Becky Lynch has kicked her off this mountain. That's what makes people so engaged and so interesting. This is why people are more interested in that match than Ronda Rousey and Charlotte. Even though Ronda Rousey and Charlotte, arguably the bigger stars. Arguably. Ronda Rousey, one of the biggest stars on planet Earth as far as female athletes. So that's why she's going to get the nod. But the story's not there. And therefore, you see a lot of people complaining, bitching and moaning about Ronda Rousey and Charlotte, but they're not too much people complaining about Becky Lynch and Bianca Belair because they can see how the story was built from the beginning. And people saw it coming. People was calling it right after SummerSlam. Oh, she's probably going to win the Royal Rumble and beat Becky at WrestleMania. Boom. That's exactly what they did. Because most people can see a story from its bare bones. Everything in between, though, is going to be up in the air. And they did a really good job of making you think that other people were going to beat Becky. Oh, she got to live. She got to lose to Liv Morgan. And then they swerved you a little bit by not having Bianca win the Royal Rumble, but have her win the Elimination Chamber. So there was some things there that made the story better. AEW didn't do that. Now you've got Jade Cargill bragging that she beat Thunder Rosa to win her title. And you're kind of like, shrug. I don't know. It is what it is. But this is what Bischoff was talking about. A commitment to story. And WWE is not perfect. I did handpick each story. It's not perfect. What's going on SmackDown makes no goddamn sense. But part of the reason why things happened on SmackDown the way that they did is because Toni Storm quit. Because she was involved with that whole thing with Charlotte. Now, no doubt in my mind, Charlotte probably would have beaten her anyway. But we don't know what they had planned for Toni Storm because she quit. Which put Charlotte in a weird position for several weeks of her trying to find new opponents and, new situations and new stuff like that. They were able to finally get things back on track when they entered Naomi into that sphere. But it took some time, But these are not collections of plot points. These are at least attempts at stories that either it's about the plot point itself or it's about the character. AEW doesn't really do that stuff. Like they do it sometimes, and when they do, people give them credit for it. But there's other times where they completely miss the ball and they strike the fuck out. And it makes no sense for them to do so. They just do collections of matches and say, yes, you won this collection of matches. Therefore, you're a top contender. And it's like, but what if I don't like this guy? Oh, well, then you'll just lose on Rampage. Like all of the tag teams, like the Gun Club or whatever. You won 400 matches. So what? Go lose on Rampage. And once you tell people like that's how things occur, are you really surprised that everybody thought Scorpio Sky was just going to lose to Wardlow? Because you booked them like shit leading up to this point. Every time somebody walks away from Rampage or not Rampage, but Dark or Dark Elevation with 100 wins, they go on Dynamite and lose in embarrassing fashion. So of course everybody thought Scorpio Sky was going to do the same thing. That's what you have taught them with your version of storytelling. All right. Like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you guys think. And I'll talk to you guys later, man. Peace out.